We're going over the top 10 must-have commander cards from Duskmourn.
I'm Mia, and Misa's going as a spider for Halloween.
I'm BZ. I've seen every season of House, even the bad ones, and we are the Nitpicking Nerds' special sponsor today. We have Factor.
We have delicious meals delivered to your door from Factor. They are fresh, never frozen, and they're ready to go in 2 minutes, whether you toss that in the microwave or the oven. Figuring out dinner is never stressful with Factor.
It lets you choose from a weekly menu of 35 options, including Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Veggie. Plus, we're both huge fans of Factor as an alternative to getting takeout multiple times a week, which seriously adds up.
Factor offers a ton of options like breakfast, smoothies, juices, small bites, and more to keep us going, well, forever, I think. I think we could eat them for every meal.
I'd say so. Head to factor75.com or click the link and use code NITPICKING50 to save 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Now, as a refresher, that's code NITPICKING50 at factor75.com to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month of orders.
We're also sponsored by Card Kingdom with a sale so good it's scary. This is Friday the 13th, and you can get 13% off on purchases $100 or more of sealed Magic products. The code is Friday13, and you can use our link. It helps keep the lights on, and it really helps the channel.
We'd appreciate it if you used our link, and you'd appreciate it if you saved money. It's a win-win. We're also sponsored by Dragon Shield because they have the best sleeves in the multiverse.
Good sleeves.
If you use our code,
Nerds.
that's going to save you 5% of your hard-earned money, which is 5% more monies that you can spend on Magic cards at Card Kingdom or wherever you use. We're also sponsored by Moxfield, but not yet. Hold on. Slow your roll. We'll be sponsored by them later. You're never going to guess where it is. And we have a Patreon if you want to see exclusive stuff that you can't see on YouTube. Head on over there for the full scoop. So this is the top 10 commander cards from Duskmourn. We're counting Duskmourn and the commander product. No reprints allowed. We're only talking about new cards. And I got to say, Duskmourn has a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of interesting designs. The cards are not overly wordy or complicated. I'm pretty excited about a lot of them. We have a lot of honorable mentions, so we're going to go through them. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're not going to rush anything, and we're just going to talk about this awesome set before we get to the top 10.
I think this set is so cool. I like the fact that they're combining a bunch of mechanics that we've seen prior into fresh and new ways to use them. And the first one we're going to talk about is Valgavolt's Lair. It's an enchantment land with hexproof. It comes in tapped, and you can choose to make it a certain color. But the most important part is enchantment land. We've never seen this before, and it will trigger all of your whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield triggers.
Yeah, I mean, Urza's Saga is an enchantment land, but that's a really, really, really weird card, and it's also not affordable, really. So this is kind of the first legit permanent enchantment land. Not like gonna break in half any commander format things, but I think it's a very interesting card and one that I'm going to keep my eye on. Maybe I'll pick up a few copies just because I could see myself playing this in most of my enchantment decks. Next up, we have Enduring Curiosity. This is like a coastal piracy, recon mission. It's got flash, so you can flash it in after they refuse to block and surprise them with a bunch of unblocked creatures, drawing you cards, or at the end step to then fire off a big attack next turn. And then even if it dies, it just comes back and it's still the enchantment that says whenever your creatures hit, you draw.
I love sneaky flash type deals, and the fact that this is a creature and then it kind of protects itself from dying, or if you need to sack it for something and it comes back immediately as a sticky enchantment that will evade a lot of types of removal. I really like that kind of theme overall in this deck.
We also like Waltz of Rage. This feels to me like a variant of Chandra's Ignition. This only hits creatures, but it will still be a one-sided wipe where your biggest thing blows up everything else, and it actually pays you off by cashing in all your other little dudes, like your mana dorks that die in this exchange, by giving you impulse draws.
5 mana can be a lot for a board wipe, but overall, if you're getting those impulses back, that's really important because you can play them until the end of your next turn. I feel like Red just has so much trouble sometimes getting that card advantage that this is a great way to do it while also helping you just clear off the board.
Yeah, I know this next one you were super excited about too.
Yeah, this is Funeral Room / Awakening Hall. It's a type of room where you can unlock one side and then keep the other and then pay to unlock it later. It's either a Zulaport Cutthroat on one side, or you can mass reanimate it like Rise of the Dark Realms on the other side. I like the fact that it has this type of flexibility, and because it's an enchantment, it'll stick around for longer than you'd expect.
Yeah, something like Rise of the Dark Realms, if we want to use that as an example, is a good win condition, but it's a all or nothing. That card is either gumming up your opening hand, being a complete paperweight, never castable on the first 8 turns of the game, or it's gonna slam dunk, win the game, not even close. But I like having this mixture. It's not going to steal your opponent's stuff, but most of the time what I really care about is reanimating my stuff. That's what I can proactively control in my graveyard. So I like that I have a functional card that can turn into a giant I win the game spell without having to take that risk.
I'm such a big fan of like modal spells overall. It's just so nice to have those stapled on for early game and late game plays. It's always just really nice to see.
Next up is another room. It's Polluted Cistern and Dim Oubliette. Dim Oubliette is an okay reanimate spell, but I do like Polluted Cistern. It's an interesting take on all of these dice trigger aristocrat type things. And it's also like only for mill. It's like if I mill an artifact creature, my opponents take 2. But if I mill 17 cards and they're all artifacts, my opponents only take 1. So you kind of want to like go in short bursts of mill to hit multiple types and ping people. It's an interesting card. I want to play with it to see. I don't know how good it is.
I'm really excited to see whether it's good too. I think there's a couple decks that I have that this could slot in. Really excited to try out all these new ones. But we're going to move on to our top 10. There were a lot of things to choose from, which is why we had so many honorable mentions. But number 10 is Split Up. 1 white for sorcery. You could choose one. Destroy all tapped creatures or destroy all untapped creatures. This is a really cheap rate for a board wipe. And just overall, if you can take advantage of tapping your creatures, whether that's things like using crewing for vehicles or Convoke or something, I feel like this can have a lot of homes.
Yeah, now this is not higher on the list because white just has an embarrassment of riches that are just amazing board wipes that are more stapley than this. This is more going to be like a specialized board wipe in certain decks that you can tweak and play around to make it one-sided, because Farewell is great, Vanquish the Horde is great, but they're not always one-sided. This can be, and I think there's a lot of interesting notches to turn with this. The first thing I think of is like, well, what if I just attack with everything all the time? And then your blockers or whatever, they're just dead. Like you said, vehicles make your stuff auto-tapped. Convoke can very easily tap most of your creatures. So there's a lot to do here. I am interested to try it out.
I really am too. I mean, there's so many cool Convoke spells like Lethal Scheme or, the one that phases out everything. I don't know. I just feel like there is so much promise with this, but because white has so many board wipes, it can't be higher on our list.
Yeah, you can also, punish somebody for making a big attack if you fog them or something, and then you untap and blow up all their dudes. That is pretty funny. Another card I think is very good with this, that I'm glad I remembered, is Githzerai Monk. You can go end step, cast the Monk, flash it in, tap all of your opponent's creatures. That's just what it does straight up. Then you untap, which means your stuff is untapped, and you go blow up everything. That is like the 1-2 wombo combo.
Yeah, or if you have a big spell that says create X tapped creature tokens or something like that, and then you blow up everything else, so you have this gigantic board and they can't really do much about it because all of their stuff is gone.
Yeah, Split Up, it's got some uses. It's getting my gears turning for brewing around it. What is number 9?
Number 9 is Abhorrent Oculus, 2 and a blue for a 5/5, but to cast it, you have to exile 6 cards from your graveyard. It flies, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, Manifest Dread. This is a new take on Manifest, which allows you to have a little bit more selection and to bin something while also making something a 2/2. I really like that, just the little bit added on to Manifest. I thought Manifest was okay prior, but the selection makes it good.
Yeah, I would say Manifest is pretty unremarkable. Like when you reality shift something, I don't ever pay attention to the actual card that's underneath the 2/2. I just go, that's a 2/2. 1 in a million times they're going to manifest something. But when you start manifesting Dread, and this time over and over and over, you're going to actually put creatures in there that you want to have that you can start turning face up. Now, the problem with this card that brings it to number 9 that isn't higher is you got to exile 6 cards from your graveyard. So you can't play this on turn 3, most likely. You got to be in a deck that has like maybe fetch lands or just some kind of equivalent self-mill ways to know that, hey, I got a Thought Scour or something. I got Mishra's Bauble. I'm going to be able to do this at some point. But once you get it, I think this card's great. This just feels like a blue Tendershoot Dryad where it's just an army at a can. You don't have to pay any more mana. Just invest that initial bit, and you're just going to have a never-ending supply of dudes that also help fill your graveyard. You can put flashback cards in there, and then you can flip them up if they're relevant.
I think in certain decks, this is going to be absolutely amazing. I mean, I know as an Euro player how important it is to get those graveyard cards early.
If this thing is cheap enough, that's going right in that Euro deck.
I think so, too. I got to utilize that graveyard more.
The one thing I'm just not sure about is I don't know. I'm having trouble picturing the decks that this goes in. There's a ton of decks that want a bunch of creatures, sure, but do you also want to fill your graveyard? So I'm not 100% sure. Maybe if there's a way to cheat it out so you don't cast it, like reanimating it, or like Collected Company is the first card I thought of that, something like Court of Calling, you put it in play. then we could be brewing something.
Yeah, it's a little niche, but I do think it has homes. But moving on to number 8, Doomsday Excruciator. Black, 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 black for a 6/6 with flying. When it enters, it was cast. Each player exiles all but the bottom 6 cards of their library face down. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. This does... I don't know. I just really like this because you are always going to be able to utilize this better than your opponents, obviously. And so because of that, if you need to sack it for the win and make sure they get their draws faster so they could actually deck out, that could be a viable strategy.
Now, I don't know if anyone else has already made this comparison, but if not, I'd like to be the first to say this is the reverse approach of the Second Sun. Everybody is now going to die and very quickly. And if you can sacrifice this, which I think is basically a mandatory thing that you should be able to do if you play this card, because obviously if all else continues equal, you'll just die first. But if you do sacrifice it or get rid of it, your opponents all die first. They're going to draw evenly, starting with the person to your left, and you're going to end up as the last player to deck out, and you just win. There's also, I would hope, faster ways to win once you get this card on the battlefield. I'm thinking Altar of Dementia. You got a couple creatures in play? Cool. Already, this is a 6/6, so target player loses the game. You mill the rest of your deck by. It's just like you're just taking people out. This card, I feel like it's kind of nutty, like extremely good in the right circumstance, but it is also a weirdo. It's definitely an interesting card.
I mean, it's so risky, but high risk, high reward, right? I think that if you play this maybe in your Nekuzar type decks, that could be really interesting, especially if you can stop yourself from drawing at an uneven rate,
Got to get that obstinate familiar.
Who knows? I mean, if you could get them to, if you could get a Burning Inquiry in a deck with this or something, everyone draws 3, and then you make them draw a couple on their upkeeps, it'll get back to you last. That could be pretty interesting.
This thing is just... It's really interesting. I love this card because it's such an unusual design that I go like, is this good? Like, will this win? I feel like I can think of all these different combos where I'm going to annihilate everybody when I play it. But, things go sideways. It also just completely destroys tutors because, you're in trouble. You're realizing the game's almost over. All of your tutors are like, oh, I need to find an answer. It's like, you have 6 cards in your library, 5 after you draw for your turn. What are you going to find?
Maybe this goes in a Grenzo deck or something, the one that slots cards to the bottom.
Okay, wait. How about with Oblivion Sower?
Yeah, that could work. That
Take
could really work.
Every land from their deck and just put it in. I mean, the possibilities are endless, folks. I'm going to have to build around this. It's not an option anymore.
Secret Commander next.
It is literally too cool. This is going to be a Secret Commander type card.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is super cool, and I'm excited to see that build. The number 7 is Into the Pit. This is 2 black for an enchantment. You can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast spells from the top by sacking a non-land permanent in addition to paying their other costs. I think that this could be really good in the decks that are hurting for card draw and stuff, or because black-white, I feel like, has a bit of trouble with card draw. There's like little bursts here and there, but getting consistent card draw might be tough. These decks often do want to be sacrificing stuff anyways, and the fact that it says non-land permanent, it doesn't say non-token, it doesn't say only creature. If you have a spare Power Stone or something, if you have, Aristocrat deck where you want to be sacking this stuff for death triggers anyways, I think that this could really put in work.
Yeah, this card has some potential. What really sets me off into thinking I'm going to be scared of this card when I see it is that if you can cast something and make something when you cast it, now we're getting into the point where you can churn through your deck pretty reasonably. The only thing that makes me question this card a little bit is that I can't play lands from the top of my library. So you're going to need some kind of way to offset that, like with Viscera's here or with like an Altar of Dementia or something, so that you can get those lands out because those are terrible. They ruin this entire card. But like, then I also think of, are people playing this with Sensei's Divining Top? Are we literally going to do, Sai, Into the Pit, and Sensei's Divining Top loops and just win the game by drawing our whole deck? Like, that seems doable to me.
I mean, plus black is great for tutoring, especially to the top with things like Imp Seal and Vamp Tutor. So if you do need something really quickly onto the top, you could just, in theory, go get it and then cast it and then get a shuffle if you have like a land or something.
Yeah, there's that card, Insidious Dreams. It's like 3 and a black and you discard X cards and you Vamp Tutor that many times. So you can stack the top 5 cards in your deck and probably win the game from that point. That seems really scary. So this feels like a card that has decent utility, but I will be worried about for like combo reasons.
Yeah, I think you need to have the right setup, but this has options. I do like just built-in card advantage too, along with just being able to sacrifice that. I mean, that's what black decks want to do for the most part.
Yeah, next we got to go to number 6, which is just one of the most pushed uncommons I've ever had the pleasure of reading. It's Arabella, Abandoned Doll. Red-white for a 1/3 artifact creature. Very simple card. Whenever it attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. They don't have to be attacking, they don't have to be tapped, they don't care if they're untapped. It's just, if you make 7 1/1s and you attack with this 2-drop, you deal 7 to each opponent and you gain 7 life.
I think this is nutty. I was thinking about it from a commander standpoint, but even from a non-commander standpoint in the 99, I was thinking about this in like a Zinnia deck, for instance, with all of your offspring tokens. You know, having this as the commander is great, and if you can slot in like an Adeline somewhere, this is going to go hard.
This thing slaps. There's plenty of cards that make tokens disproportionately to how much mana you spend, like with Call the Coppercoats. You fire that off, and like, what do you want from this card? It's a 2-drop that just says when it attacks, you destroy people. And your opponents are going to have to invest mana and resources into killing this thing that you played on turn 2 and didn't have to invest any future mana in. That is how you win games, is by just presenting threat after threat after threat. And having this 2-drop just be a ticking clock on the game is unheard of, especially just an uncommon. You might have even not known this card was in the set.
I mean, putting this in like a Caesar deck or something, because that's going to be making a ton of soldier tokens, or just soldier decks in general. Plus, it always counts itself because it's a 1/3.
And that life gain just means that you can happily turn your stuff sideways and throw down the defenses because you're going to gain a bunch of life. And, you know, extra combats, I don't even know if we mentioned that yet, but like extra triggers, Ishin, this goes in Ishin all day. This card is scary. I'm going to be shivering in my timbers every time I see it.
Shivering in my timbers. The next one is number 5, Enduring Vitality. 1 green for a 2/3 enchantment creature with vigilance. Creatures can tap to add 1 mana of any color, and when it dies, if it was a creature, return it as an enchantment but not a creature.
Yeah, there's a couple things going on with this. We like that, just like the blue one, it has that built-in protection, and it's really a text box that I would love to preserve. I want my creatures to be able to tap for mana, so even if this thing bites removal or I have to sacrifice it, cool, I get to keep the effect until you answer it again, and now this time it's harder to answer. And I think the thing that we didn't mention in the honorable mention, because we knew we were going to be mentioning it here, is that this cycle of creatures, when they die, if they were creatures, they come back as an enchantment. They're combo cards with Opalescence. When you have Opalescence, it says your non-creature enchantments are creatures. So when you sacrifice this, it comes back as an enchantment that is a creature, and then you can sacrifice it, and it'll come back as an enchantment that is a creature, because it's just worded the best possible way. So if you have Altar of Dementia, which I keep mentioning, I guess, because that's the card of this set.
A Zulaport Cutthroat, a Blood Artist.
Any payoff, any sack outlet. You go infinite.
Yeah, it can deal so much damage, and I love the fact that it's just giving us all this opportunity. That's what I meant a little bit earlier when I was like, this is shaking things up in like a fresh way without being too wordy or bringing in too many mechanics that we've never heard of.
I do think, Duskmourn is a slam dunk in terms of, I think it's the appropriate complexity. It's not overwhelming. I mean, Arabella has like 3 words on it, and I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Like, these cards are really sweet. And the next one, probably one of the wordier cards in the set, though, as we segue into this. Number 4, Meat Hook Massacre 2. Is it worse than the original? Maybe. It's XX black for an enchantment. When it enters, each player sacrifices X creatures. Whenever a creature you control dies, you may pay 3 life and return it to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, they may pay 3 life. If they don't, return that card to your control with a finality counter on it. So I can sacrifice all my creatures proactively and just pay 3 life to bring them back for 1 more go. And then if they die again, they'll get exiled. And my opponents now have to pay life to stop that from happening. Mia, how do we feel about this?
I think it has high highs and low lows, because at its core, I was like 4 mana for if my stuff dies, I can pay and bring it back, and then like just also making sure that happens to my opponents. But I will feel super bad if this just goes out and dies instantly, if things get exiled and I can't get any triggers off of it. 6 mana is a lot to make everyone sack 1. It doesn't say non-token creatures. I think that in the right deck, this could be very cool. For instance, in my Mahadi deck, if I sacked Voracious Fellbeast and made everyone sacrifice creatures and had it come back, I would happily pay 3 life for that, because then they'd have a very hard choice. But with so many tokens being thrown around, because it doesn't say non-token to sacrifice, there's a high possibility that someone sacks a Mana Dork and then a a vampire token or something, or like an elf or something, and then it comes back and they're like, I'm not going to pay 3 life for you to get my Mana Dork back. You can have it at that point.
Yeah, some of the creatures that don't matter, you're just going to get those and you're going to be like, yay, I guess. But I'm not sure that the default mode here is 6 mana. Yeah, like we said, I think it's just black, 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 black for an enchantment. You hope it sticks. Maybe you can proactively sacrifice some dudes to get like ETBs and stuff to justify paying 4 mana for like a do nothing. I'm really excited to see. This card could be completely forgettable, or it could be the best card in the set. We're tending to think that it's closer to the best card in the set. Like, we're having it at number 4. We think it's pretty high up, but I do need to experiment with this a fair bit. It could be Mikaeus the Unhallowed. It could be meh.
Yeah. I mean, the sequels are never as good as the originals, but I think the best part about Meat Hook Massacre 1 is the fact that it comes down for 2 mana at its face, and the XX part is just extra. It's just gravy at that point.
Yeah, this feels like the same thing where, like, every once in a while you'll pay 6 mana for this, or maybe 8 mana. 8 mana starts to be more reliable, but it's a lot of mana to pay. And I think if you can proactively do this and you don't have problem casting a quad black enchantment, you should probably put this in your deck. Just like you should put it in Moxfield.com. If you want to know if your deck can support adding the Meat Hook Massacre 2 and the Doomsday guy who cost 1,000 black pips, you can scroll down, look at your mana base, see what percentage of your lands produce what colors. And honestly, it's just one of the many, many tools and little tricks up your sleeve that make Moxfield the best way to build decks.
Yeah, when I go on Moxfield.com, I try and check whether I have enough pips and just lands that make that color in my deck, and turns out I'm trying to add it in a Boros deck, so it doesn't really work. But Moxfield will tell you that, and you can sort by color now of your decks on their My Deck section. They have a ton of new options. Check it out, Moxfield.com.
What a fantastic website. We're going to go to number 3, which is another room, Doll Maker's Shop and Porcelain Gallery. To refresh what rooms are, you may cast either half. That door unlocks on the battlefield, and as a sorcery, you can pay the mana of a locked door to unlock it. So we're probably going to pay Doll Maker's Shop first because it's 1 and a white, and then whenever 1 or more non-toy creatures you control attack a player, you get a 1/1 white toy artifact creature token. The other side, which you will cast later, you will activate later to win the game on the spot, is 4 white for Porcelain Gallery. Another enchantment. Creatures you control have base power and toughness, each equal to the number of creatures you control.
I mean, in white weenie decks, this goes hard. Non-toy is so easy to get, and it doesn't say non-token, non-toy. It just says non-toy. All of your little soldier tokens will be attacking. All of the ones from Illustrious Wanderglyph will be smacking around, and you will have even more toy artifact creature tokens to get to that 6 mana where all of your creatures are just base toughness like 20/20 at that point.
Yeah, this is pretty wild because I would just play Doll Maker's Shop. If you can attack with 3 non-toy creatures, fun fact, most creatures in Magic are not toys. That's a really, not everybody knew that. But if you just attack with 3 non-toys, a couple flyers, whatever, get your combat calligraphers in there, you just get to profit creatures. That's great. That's already good. And I get to staple a Cathar's Crusade level win con onto my very playable 2-drop that'll just make me tokens extremely reliably. The only thing, notably, is the creature has to go from not attacking to attacking. So Combat Calligrapher is good at triggering this, but if you attack with Combat Calligrapher and get a 2/1 tapped and attacking, that does not trigger an additional time. Also, remember, it's only 1 per player, but these are all caveats that we don't care about because this card is still cracked.
I also like the fact that it's only attack a player. It's not like dealing combat damage to a player, which is so much tougher to do than just turning things sideways.
Yeah, if you have ETBs, just send your dumb 1/1s to their death. Sorry, guys. I have more 1/1s that are fresh that can block. It's just a free roll.
Yeah, I think this is going to find homes in many, many decks, and I'm super excited to see how it plays out. Number 2, though, is a card that I think I'm going to be putting in a deck, actually. It's Tyvar the Pummeler. 1 green for a 3/3. If you tap another untapped creature you control, he gains indestructible until end of turn and tap it, but that's not what I'm excited about. 3 green. Creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control.
Sheesh.
I think that's spicy, and for 5 mana, that is a pretty good overrun.
That's a really scary ability. And you know what makes me want to do as the opponent? Kill Tyvar. Oh, wait, they thought of everything. The first ability makes him basically unkillable. You're going to have to exile him because indestructible for every time you can tap an untapped creature. There's not enough removal spells that are, castable that say destroy that you could beat that. I'm just going to leave open like 2 Elf Warriors and a Mana Dork, and now you can never destroy Tyvar. He's basically indestructible. And then having that really, really strong ability on it to just pump maybe even multiple times a turn if you can reduce the ability, or if you're playing Elf Ball, or if you're playing Green Stompy, anything. This thing just destroys people. The only sad part is that they don't get trample. So it's not literally Overwhelming Stampede, but it's pretty dang close.
I was going to mention that the fact that you can stack these multiple times, I'm so happy it's not like creatures you control become XX, where X is the greatest power. It's they just get +X. So if you play this in a big green stompy deck and you slot in a Galta or a Primeval Protector, or just something big overall because it's gaining a lot of counters, you can make your creatures gigantic.
Green's got big boys, and throw down a Garruk's Uprising, and then your creatures are going to have trample anyway, and that pretty much solves all your problems. I also like that this is instant speed activation. You can just go full send, and then the opponent's like, "Ah, crap," and you go, "You figure it out. If you block wrong, you lose the game."
It's not my problem at that point.
Absolutely.
I just have a ton of this open mana here.
Yeah. Ooh, shame. I have this 10 mana. What are you gonna do? And then they're gonna have to chump block with all their important creatures. It's pretty great.
I mean, I love a good overrun on an elf, and even though it doesn't give trample, other elves do. So this will just be some extra power for it.
Tyvar's a real one. He's a really cool dude. So number 1, the best card or cards in the set we think for Commander are the Allied Verge lands. You can call us boring if you want, but these lands are very, very strong. They enter untapped. We'll use Flood Farm Verge as an example because all of these lands are not the same. This land taps for white always, and it taps for blue only if you control a plains or an island. So there's no reverse of this. There's no land that taps for blue and then says tapped at a white if you control a plains or island. They're only like this, and they only work for each allied pair, but they are untapped lands that always produce at least one color, and very trivially, they can turn on to just be a dual land.
Look, nerds, eat your vegetables. I think that this is a great cycle. I don't care if it's boring to put this as number 1. I think that this is better than most other lands in this cycle. It will never come in tapped. It will never not tap for colored mana, and that's usually what I'm hurting for. I hate the ones that are like, add colorless and add it, but only if you can control a swamp. That is so conditional. Not a fan of it. But overall, just being able to tap for colored mana, and then also it doesn't say basic plains, basic island. It just says plains or island. So if you have a type of if you have your, not flooded glacier, it's hollowed fountain. If you have a triome or something, this will activate it. I really like that caveat, and I am going to be putting these in a lot of my decks because of it.
I wasn't 100% sold on these 5 lands, but when I started thinking about what lands are they better than, that really started solidifying it for me. Because there's a lot of replacement lands like, oh, cool, Lush Portico. It's pretty good. You could easily play it in your deck, but you could also easily exclude it. I'm thinking, let's use Flood Farm Village or Verge as an example. It's the blue-white land. I think it's better than Port Town. I think it's better than Prairie Stream. I think it's better than Glacial Fortress, which that one was a huge one for me. I'm like, yeah, this is just better than Glacial Fortress. If I don't have those criteria, it's an untapped white land. It's not a tap land.
Yeah, they're better than the Snarls. I just really, really like these because I feel like sometimes if you're in multiple colors of decks and that sort of thing, sometimes if you don't want to be putting in the filter lands, because if you're putting in a ton of those, they can only tap for colorless at a certain point unless you have the colors to tap it. This always will come in and tapped. And as you mentioned, Lush Portico turns this land on and makes it tap for both colors.
We can play all of them together. Yes, Allied Verge lands, eat your vegetables, nerds, because these lands are very, very strong, and I'm going to be happy to pick up probably like 2 copies of each.
I think we need them.
We have a lot of decks. If you want to see some more decks, maybe the Duskmourn Precons, that video is already out. Yeah, we already did it. Make sure you check it out.